Close your eyes and imagine the sounds of dawn, the gentle chorus of chirps, the soft rustle of wings in the trees. You might picture birds, but what if those voices are actually echoes from a world that vanished 66 million years ago? What if I told you that outside your window even now dinosaurs are waiting for the dawn, not the towering giants you imagine from ancient times? Those disappeared long ago when the world changed forever. But some dinosaurs found a different path entirely. They discovered something remarkable about survival that the giants never learned, something written in their very bones and carried forward through millions of years of careful adaptation. The mystery that has captivated scientists for generations is elegantly simple. How did some dinosaurs endure when others could not? What made the difference between disappearing forever and finding a way to flourish? The answer unfolds in a story of unexpected survival, written in feathers and song, playing out in every garden around us. To understand this mystery, we must travel back to a world that seems like a dream. 66 million years ago, Earth was a place of endless summer. Vast forests stretched to every horizon, filled with trees that had never known frost. Rivers meandered through landscapes where flowers had only recently learned to bloom, painting the world in colors that would seem almost magical to us now. In this warm world lived creatures that would take your breath away. Sauropods, gentle giants, longer than 3 city buses, moved like living bridges between earth and sky. Their long necks swayed through treetops that had stood for centuries, reaching toward leaves that grew impossibly high. Herds of 3-horned dinosaurs grazed in meadows that seemed to stretch beyond the horizon, their footsteps creating paths that countless generations would follow. Tyrannosaurus rex, tall as a 2-story house, walked through forests of ancient pines and towering ferns. These weren't the monsters of movies, but living beings perfectly suited to their world, part of ecosystems so complex and stable they had flourished for over 160 million years. Every creature, from the smallest feathered dinosaur to the mightiest long-necked giant, had found its place in this ancient symphony of life. Then something changed everything. High above the atmosphere, a mountain of stone and metal raced toward Earth through the darkness of space. When it struck the shallow seas near what we now call Mexico, the world shuddered in ways it had never experienced. The impact sent waves of heat and debris racing across continents, while rock turned to vapor and shot into space, only to fall back as glowing rain that ignited forests across vast distances. But it was what happened next that sealed the fate of the giants. Dust and ash filled the sky like the thickest storm clouds you've ever seen, but these clouds would not pass with the weather. The sun grew dim, then dimmer still, until day and night became almost indistinguishable. For months, perhaps years, Earth lived in a twilight that seemed to have no end. Without sunlight, plants began to wither. The vast forests that had fed the giant herbivores slowly faded away, leaving behind landscapes of grey silence. The great dinosaurs found themselves in a world that could no longer sustain them. Their massive bodies, which had been their strength for so long, now demanded more food than existed anywhere. Hearts that had pumped blood through bodies the size of trucks began to struggle and fail. One by one, species that had thrived for millions of years grew still and quiet. 75% of all life on Earth disappeared during this time. Every towering dinosaur, every mighty predator that had ruled the land for countless generations faded into memory. The thunderous footsteps that had shaken the ground fell silent. The age of giants had ended, yet, in the growing quiet of this transformed world, something stirred in the shadows. Some creatures had found a different way to meet the darkness, and their story was just beginning. In the quiet world that emerged from the darkness, small dinosaurs discovered something their giant cousins could never have imagined. Being tiny had become their salvation, though they could hardly have known it at the time. These survivors belonged to a group called Maniraptoran theropods, a name that means hand snatchers. Picture creatures about the size of ravens or small turkeys, covered in wispy feathers that caught what little light filtered through the dusty air. They moved through the changed landscape with quick, darting movements, their bright eyes constantly searching for opportunities that larger creatures couldn't even perceive. While the giants had needed enormous meals to survive, Imagine trying to feed a creature that required several hundred pounds of food every single day. These small survivors could thrive on fragments, a handful of seeds discovered beneath a fallen log, a cluster of insects hiding under bark, perhaps some scattered berries or a bit of meat from smaller creatures that had also perished. They had learned to see abundance where others found only scarcity. Their lightweight frames allowed them to move in ways that would have been impossible for their massive relatives. They could slip between fallen logs that would have blocked a giant's path, dart through dense undergrowth that larger creatures couldn't navigate, and scramble up rocky slopes with the agility of squirrels. When danger approached, perhaps one of the few surviving large predators, they could simply disappear into shadows and crevices too small for anything bigger to follow. Think of the difference between heating a vast cathedral and warming a cozy cottage during winter. The small dinosaurs were like cottages. Their compact bodies required so little energy to maintain that they could stay warm even when food was scarce. They could huddle together for comfort, nestle into protected spaces between rocks or roots, and wait out the harshest conditions with patience that their giant relatives had never needed to develop. But perhaps most remarkably, these small survivors could start new families quickly. Where giant dinosaurs had taken many years to mature, sometimes decades, and laid only a few precious eggs each season, the small theropods reached adulthood within months or just a few years. They could raise multiple broods in the time it had once taken a giant to reach breeding age. This meant they could adapt to their changing world at a pace that would have seemed miraculous in earlier times. Each generation could experiment with new ways of finding food, new places to nest, new strategies for avoiding the dangers that remained in their transformed world. Successful innovations spread quickly through their populations, while less helpful traits disappeared within just a few generations. They were evolution in action, changing and improving with each passing season. Their small size also meant they needed less territory to support themselves. Where a single giant herbivore might have required square miles of vegetation, hundreds of small survivors could find everything they needed within a much smaller area. This allowed them to discover and exploit resources that would have been insignificant to larger creatures, but represented feasts to those who had learned to appreciate life's smaller offerings. As the world slowly healed and the sun grew brighter through the clearing atmosphere, these modest creatures found themselves inheriting an empty planet. The age of giants was over, but the age of the small and swift had just begun. They carried within their delicate bodies all the secrets they would need to not just survive, but to flourish in ways that would eventually transform the very skies above them. Long before the world changed, small theropod dinosaurs had already begun to develop something truly extraordinary: feathers. What started as simple hair-like filaments covering their bodies would become one of evolution's most elegant solutions to the challenge of survival. Though none of these ancient creatures could have foreseen the miraculous future their plumage would unlock. These early feathers were nothing like the complex plumes we see on birds today. Imagine something closer to soft, downy fuzz, delicate strands that created a layer of warmth around the dinosaur's body, like nature's own winter coat. Some species had feathers that looked like tiny ribbons dancing in the breeze. Others bore plumes that resembled dandelion seeds caught in gentle air currents, while still others developed more complex branching structures that caught and held warmth with remarkable efficiency. Recent discoveries in ancient lake beds have revealed dinosaurs preserved with their feathers intact, some even maintaining traces of their original colors. Scientists can now tell us that some of these creatures bore brilliant reds and deep blacks. Others showed intricate patterns of browns and golds that would rival any sunset. These weren't just practical coverings, they were living artwork that helped dinosaurs recognize their own kind, attract mates, and communicate across the landscapes they called home. When the world grew cold and dark, feathers became lifelines in the most literal sense. While giant dinosaurs struggled desperately to maintain their body temperature in the cooling world, the small feathered survivors wrapped themselves in natural insulation, more effective than any clothing humans have ever devised. Their feathers trapped warm air close to their skin, creating tiny personal climates that allowed them to stay active, even when temperatures dropped far below what their ancestors had ever experienced. But feathers offered much more than warmth alone. The The same intricate structures that provided insulation also served as perfect camouflage. Feathered dinosaurs could blend into the dappled shadows of recovering forests, their plumage breaking up their outlines until they seemed to disappear among fallen leaves and twisted branches. This invisibility meant safety from the few large predators that had managed to survive the Great Dying, allowing them to forage and explore without constant fear. As generations passed, feathers began to serve yet another remarkable purpose. Some dinosaurs developed longer, stiffer feathers along their arms, early versions of wings that allowed them to glide short distances between trees or rocks. Others used their colorful plumage in elaborate displays, fanning their feathers like living rainbows to attract potential partners or establish territories in their slowly recovering world. Perhaps the most remarkable discovery has come from studying fossilized melanosomes, tiny structures within feathers that create color. Scientists have found that many of these ancient dinosaurs bore feathers with the same cellular structures that create the brilliant blues of modern jays, the iridescent greens of hummingbirds, or the deep, rich blacks of ravens. The connection between past and present became visible in ways that take our breath away, showing us that the beauty we admire in birds today had its roots in survival strategies perfected millions of years ago. Different lineages experimented with different feather types. Some developed downy undercoats topped with longer, waterproof outer feathers, perfect for creatures that needed to stay dry while foraging near streams and puddles. Others grew specialized feathers around their faces that may have helped them detect air currents or sense vibrations, giving them advantages in hunting small prey or avoiding danger. Feathers had evolved from simple temperature control into sophisticated tools for survival, communication, camouflage, and eventually flight itself. They were evolution's answer to a world where versatility meant the difference between thriving and disappearing forever. In the soft whisper of feathers moving through air, in the shimmer of iridescent plumes catching morning light, the future of dinosaurs was already taking shape, though it would be millions of years before that future would fill the skies with song. While their giant cousins had spent millions of years becoming specialists, the small surviving dinosaurs possessed something far more valuable in a changing world: flexibility. Their beaks and teeth told stories of creatures willing to eat whatever the world offered, adapting their meals to match what nature provided, rather than demanding that nature provide what they preferred. Some of these survivors had sharp, pointed teeth, perfect for catching insects and small prey that scurried through the recovering landscape. Others developed broader bills suited for cracking seeds or stripping berries from the hardy bushes that first returned to the healing world. Many combined both approaches, switching their diet with the seasons like nature's most adaptable opportunists, reading the subtle signs of abundance wherever they appeared. When the great forests faded and vast herbivores no longer roamed the landscape, these small dinosaurs simply adjusted their approach to eating. They learned to probe beneath bark for hidden insects, to dig in soft earth for roots and tubers that had survived the cold years, to wade in shallow waters for small fish and amphibians that thrived in the cleaner streams. Nothing edible escaped their notice, and nothing nutritious was beneath their consideration. Picture a Tyrannosaurus rex, magnificent but forever bound to hunting large prey. Its massive jaws and dagger-like teeth were masterpieces of evolution, but designed for one purpose alone: bringing down creatures as large as elephants. When large prey vanished from the world, these perfect predators found themselves with skills that no longer matched their environment. They were like master musicians whose instruments had been taken away. The small survivors, by contrast, were like talented generalists who could play any instrument they encountered. One day they might feast on a bounty of early fruits that appeared on recovering trees. The next, they could sustain themselves entirely on beetle larvae found beneath rotting logs. When flowers began to bloom again in the warming world, they discovered nectar and pollen, energy sources rich in sugars and proteins that their specialized cousins had never learned to appreciate or even recognize as food. This dietary flexibility extended beyond individual feeding to their social behavior as well. Some small theropod groups learned to work together, sharing information about food sources across their communities through gentle calls and subtle gestures. When one discovered a fallen tree full of nutritious grubs, others would follow. When another found a patch of protein-rich seeds, the knowledge spread like ripples through their social networks. Their digestive systems evolved to handle this remarkable variety. Unlike the giant herbivores, who had required specific gut bacteria to process massive amounts of tough plant material, or the enormous predators whose stomachs were designed only for meat, these survivors developed the ability to extract nutrition from almost anything organic they encountered. Seeds became particularly important partners in their survival story. As flowering plants began to diversify in the recovering world, they formed relationships with these small dinosaurs that benefited both sides. The dinosaurs received nutrition from fruits and seeds, while the plants gained partners who would carry their seeds to new locations in their digestive systems, planting tomorrow's forests with every meal. Some lineages even learned to store food during times of abundance, hiding seeds and dried insects in bark crevices or hollow logs for leaner times. This forward-thinking approach to nutrition gave them advantages that purely instinct-driven creatures couldn't match. In learning to eat everything the world offered, these modest survivors had discovered one of nature's most fundamental secrets, that survival often belongs not to the most specialized, but to those most willing to change. Among all the gifts that helped small dinosaurs survive, perhaps none was more transformative than their gradual mastery of the air. Flight didn't arrive suddenly like a thunderclap. It emerged like dawn itself, slowly and then with breathtaking completeness, opening up possibilities that earthbound creatures could never have imagined. The story begins with dinosaurs that couldn't truly fly, but had learned to glide with remarkable grace. Picture a small, feathered creature perched on a high branch in the recovering forest, its arms extended to reveal elongated feathers that caught the morning breeze like natural sails. With a gentle leap, it would drift between trees, landing softly on distant perches that ground-bound predators could never reach, navigating a three-dimensional world that existed above the dangers and competitions of the forest floor. These early gliders discovered that the air offered more than just transportation. It provided escape routes that existed in every direction. When danger approached on the ground, they could simply step into the sky and drift to safety. When food grew scarce in one area, they could glide to unexplored territories that walking creatures might never find, following air currents to distant groves where berries ripened or insects swarmed. Over many generations, some lineages developed stronger flight muscles and more sophisticated wing feathers. Their bones became hollow like delicate tubes, reducing weight while maintaining remarkable strength, nature's own version of architectural engineering that would inspire human aircraft designers millions of years later. Their breastbones grew larger and more pronounced to anchor the powerful muscles that would eventually drive true, sustained flight. The transition from gliding to powered flight opened up entirely new ways of living that seemed almost magical compared to their earthbound ancestors. These early flyers could chase insects through the air with precision that ground-based hunters couldn't match. They could pluck fruits from the very tips of branches, accessing food sources that other survivors couldn't even see, much less reach. They could build their nests in places that offered perfect safety from ground-based threats. High cliff faces, isolated treetops, even small islands surrounded by water. Flight also meant these survivors could respond to environmental changes in ways their earthbound relatives never could. When local conditions became challenging, perhaps a drought dried up water sources or seasonal changes made food scarce, flying dinosaurs could simply travel to more hospitable areas. They carried within their wings the ability to outrun many kinds of disaster, searching vast territories for the resources they needed to thrive. Some of the most remarkable early flyers were creatures like Archaeopteryx, whose fossils preserved the delicate impressions of flight feathers, alongside teeth and claws that still spoke clearly of their dinosaur heritage. They were living bridges between two worlds, the ancient realm of earthbound dinosaurs and the aerial domain that their descendants would eventually come to dominate with unprecedented success. As these airborne pioneers explored their three-dimensional world, they began to diversify in ways that would have seemed impossible to their ground-dwelling ancestors. Some became aerial hunters, developing keen eyesight and precision flying skills that allowed them to catch insects and small prey in mid-air. Others specialized in long-distance travel, evolving efficient flight patterns that could carry them across vast landscapes in search of seasonal food sources. Still others learned to hover like tiny helicopters while feeding on nectar from flowers, forming partnerships with plants that would reshape both lineages forever. The sky, once empty of vertebrate life except for the occasional pterosaur, began to fill with new sounds. The whisper of feathers cutting through air, calls that could carry across vast distances, and the gentle rush of wings catching thermal currents that would lift these survivors toward futures filled with possibilities their ancestors could never have dreamed. In learning to fly, these small dinosaurs had not just gained a new way of moving, they had inherited an entirely new world. Hidden within the bodies of these small surviving dinosaurs was perhaps their most crucial advantage, an internal furnace that burned differently than any of their giant relatives. While the great dinosaurs had relied on the sun's warmth to fuel their massive bodies, these modest survivors had learned to generate their own heat from within, carrying their own personal summers wherever they went. This internal fire, what scientists call warm-blooded metabolism, meant these small dinosaurs could remain active even when the world grew cold and dark. Their hearts beat rapidly like tiny drums, pumping heated blood through compact bodies that could maintain a constant, comfortable temperature regardless of their surroundings. They were like portable hearths that never needed to wait for external warmth to begin their daily activities. The difference this made during the long twilight years following the Great Change cannot be understated. While cold-blooded creatures grew sluggish as temperatures dropped, becoming slow and vulnerable, these warm-blooded survivors continued to hunt, forage, and explore with undiminished energy. They could search for food during the coolest hours when competition was minimal, and they could remain alert and responsive when others had grown torpid with cold. Their smaller bodies made this internal heating system remarkably efficient. Think of the difference between warming a vast mansion and heating a cozy cottage during winter. The cottage reaches comfort quickly and maintains that warmth with far less fuel. These compact dinosaurs could maintain their ideal body temperature using just a fraction of the food that would have been needed to heat a giant's massive frame. High metabolism also meant rapid healing and quick responses to threats that might emerge in their transformed world. Where larger dinosaurs might have taken weeks to recover from injuries, these small survivors could mend torn muscles and heal cuts within just a few days. Their immune systems worked faster, their reflexes stayed sharp, and their capacity to learn and adapt to new situations kept pace with their rapidly changing environment. This metabolic advantage extended to their offspring as well. Warm-blooded parents could incubate their eggs more effectively, keeping them at optimal temperatures even during cool nights when the air grew thin and cold. Their chicks hatched more quickly and grew at rates that would have seemed miraculous to their giant cousins. Generations could replace themselves rapidly, allowing these lineages to evolve and adapt with remarkable speed as their world continued to change around them. Perhaps most remarkably, their efficient metabolism supported the enormous energy demands of flight. The rapid wing beats that would eventually carry dinosaurs into mastery of the sky required tremendous amounts of power, delivered instantly and sustained over long periods. Only hearts and lungs evolved for high-energy living could meet such demanding requirements consistently. Their warm-blooded nature also allowed them to be active during different times of day than their cold-blooded competitors. While other survivors needed to warm themselves in the sun each morning before they could hunt effectively, the small theropods could begin their day in complete darkness, taking advantage of dawn hours when insects were sluggish, and other small prey were still waiting for the sun's energy to animate them. As the world slowly warmed again, and life began to flourish in the healing landscape, these metabolic pioneers found themselves perfectly positioned to seize every opportunity that emerged. Their internal fires had not only carried them through the darkest years of Earth's recovery, they had prepared them to ignite a renaissance of life that would eventually fill every corner of the sky with wings and song. While small theropod dinosaurs wrote the most remarkable survival story, they weren't the only ancient creatures to find ways through the darkness. Other members of the Archosaur family, dinosaurs' closest relatives, discovered their own paths to endurance, each offering unique insights into the many different ways life can persist when everything familiar disappears. Crocodilians, those armored guardians of rivers and swamps, possessed advantages that proved invaluable when the world changed so dramatically. Their semi-aquatic lifestyle meant they lived in environments that remained more stable than terrestrial habitats. While land-based ecosystems collapsed around them, rivers and wetlands continued to harbor life. Small fish, aquatic insects, frogs, and other water-dwelling creatures that could sustain a patient predator, willing to wait for the right moment. These ancient survivors were masters of a different kind of efficiency than their warm-blooded cousins. Unlike the high-energy lifestyle that served small theropods so well, crocodilians perfected the art of doing more with less energy than seemed possible. They could slow their heart rates to near stillness, lowering their metabolic needs to almost nothing when food became scarce. During the hardest years, they simply waited, motionless in muddy waters, surviving on stored fat and occasional small meals that came within reach of their powerful jaws. Turtles discovered yet another approach to survival that differed from all the rest. Their shells provided protection not just from predators, but from environmental extremes that challenged other creatures. Some species could retreat completely into their armor, creating sealed personal environments that helped them weather the worst conditions the changing world could offer. Others learned to burrow deep into mud or sand, entering states of suspended animation that could last for months at a time. The longevity of these creatures also worked strongly in their favor, where rapid reproduction helped small dinosaurs adapt quickly to changing conditions. Turtles and crocodilians survived through sheer persistence and patience. Individual animals could live for decades or even centuries, carrying their species through extended periods of hardship that might have claimed entire generations of shorter-lived creatures. Small mammals, though not archosaurs, offer another fascinating perspective on survival strategies during this crucial time. Many were already living underground when catastrophe struck, safe in burrow systems that protected them from temperature extremes and environmental chaos above ground. Their tiny size meant they could subsist on seeds, roots, and insects that remained available even when larger food sources had disappeared from the landscape. Each group that survived did so by exploiting different aspects of the transformed world around them. The small theropods mastered versatility, flight, and warm-blooded efficiency. Crocodilians perfected patience and aquatic living. Turtles relied on protection and remarkable endurance. Mammals embraced underground security and rapid reproduction in safe spaces. Together, these diverse survivors created the foundation for the modern world's incredible diversity. They demonstrated that there isn't just one correct way to endure catastrophe. Nature rewards many different approaches to the challenge of continuing life when everything familiar disappears. Their success reminds us that survival often comes not from being the strongest or largest, but from finding the right match between your abilities and your environment's new demands. In the years following the Great Change, Earth resembled a vast garden slowly awakening from the deepest winter it had ever known. Where once towering forests had stretched endlessly toward distant horizons, scattered groves of hardy plants began to reclaim the transformed landscape with quiet determination. Ferns unfurled their delicate fronds in newly opened spaces, while flowering plants, still relatively new to the world, found unprecedented opportunities to spread into territories once dominated by ancient conifers and towering cycads. The surviving small theropods moved through this changed world like careful explorers discovering a new continent. Every sunrise brought fresh discoveries that would have been impossible in the crowded world of their ancestors. A patch of berries, growing where a giant's footprint had once pressed deep into mud, or a fallen log teeming with insects that provided unexpected feasts for creatures willing to investigate every crevice and shadow. These early survivors faced a world that was both empty and full of possibilities they were only beginning to understand. Without the great herbivore herds, vast meadows lay uncropped for the first time in millions of years, allowing entirely new plant communities to establish themselves in ways that had been impossible before. Streams ran clearer, without the massive bodies that had once stirred their sediments while drinking or cooling themselves. The very air seemed different, quieter, but somehow more alive with potential for change and growth. Some theropod lineages began to specialize in ways that would have been unthinkable in the crowded ecosystems of giants. Certain groups discovered that the proliferating flowers offered rich sources of nectar and protein-packed pollen, resources that had been too scattered or too well defended to exploit when competition was fierce. Others learned to wade in shallow waters with new confidence, finding abundant small fish and amphibians in streams no longer disturbed by creatures the size of buildings seeking to drink or bathe. The pace of life itself seemed to shift in this emptier world. Without the constant pressure of avoiding enormous predators or competing with giant herbivores for limited resources, these small survivors could invest more energy in exploration and experimentation than ever before. They tried foods their ancestors had never tasted, investigated nesting sites in locations that had been too dangerous to consider, and gradually expanded their territories into lands that had been inaccessible or too risky to explore. Social behaviors began to evolve and flourish in new directions as well. Some species discovered advantages in forming loose flocks that could share information about food sources and potential dangers through increasingly sophisticated calls and gestures. Others developed more complex communication systems, vocalizations that could convey specific information about the quality of food sources or the presence of the few remaining large predators that still pose threats. Their feathers, originally evolved for warmth and display in a different world, found new purposes in these changed circumstances. Some species used their plumage for more sophisticated camouflage among the new plant communities that were establishing themselves. Others developed flight capabilities that allowed them to exploit food sources in the upper canopy of recovering forests, areas that ground-bound survivors couldn't reach and that had been too crowded with aerial pterosaurs to access safely in earlier times. The recovering landscape offered lessons in patience as well as opportunity. Seeds that had lain dormant in the soil for years began to sprout as conditions improved. Lakes and rivers, clearer now than they had been in millions of years, supported new communities of aquatic life that provided fresh food sources for adaptable survivors willing to learn new hunting techniques. As seasons passed and the world continued its slow healing, these adaptable pioneers laid the groundwork for evolutionary changes that would eventually transform not just their own lineages, but the entire character of life on Earth, setting the stage for transformations that would unfold over millions of years. In the spacious world that emerged after the Great Dying, evolution began to move with remarkable grace and speed that would have been impossible in the crowded ecosystems of earlier times. The surviving theropods found themselves with something their ancestors had rarely possessed: room to grow and change without constant competition from well-established giants who had occupied every available niche for millions of years. This freedom sparked what scientists call adaptive radiation, though the term hardly captures the elegant dance of change that unfolded across the healing landscape. Like water flowing into empty channels after a dam breaks, different lineages of survivors began to explore new ways of living that had been unthinkable when every ecological role was already filled. Some grew slightly larger, gradually filling roles once occupied by medium-sized dinosaurs. Others became even smaller and more specialized, discovering niches that had never existed before. Within just a few million years, a brief moment in the vast scope of evolutionary time, these modest survivors gave rise to an astonishing variety of forms and lifestyles. Some developed longer legs for running across the open landscapes that were appearing as forests recovered. Others evolved stronger claws for climbing in the regenerating woodlands where new tree species were establishing themselves. Many refined their flight capabilities, with different groups specializing in different styles of aerial living that took advantage of the empty skies. The flowering plants that were spreading across the healing world formed partnerships with many of these evolving dinosaurs that benefited both sides in ways that created entirely new ecosystems. As flowers developed new colors, shapes, and fragrances to attract pollinators, certain theropod lineages evolved longer, more delicate beaks, perfectly suited for reaching nectar in deep blossoms. Their tongues lengthened and became more agile. Their flight patterns grew more precise and energy efficient, and their ability to remember the locations of productive flowers became remarkably sophisticated. Other lineages moved in entirely different directions. Some discovered that the recovering wetlands offered rich opportunities for creatures willing to adapt to wading and swimming lifestyles. They developed longer legs and necks, allowing them to probe deeper waters for fish, frogs, and aquatic invertebrates. Their beaks became specialized tools, some sharp and pointed for spearing quick-moving prey, others broad and flat for filtering small organisms from muddy water, still others curved and sensitive for reaching into crevices among rocks and roots. The rapid pace of change was made possible partly by the relatively small size of these surviving populations. In the mathematics of evolution, smaller groups can change more quickly because beneficial mutations spread through the entire population within just a few generations. What might have taken tens of millions of years in a crowded world of established giants happened in mere millions among these flexible survivors who face little competition for new ways of life. Perhaps most remarkably, many lineages began to experiment with new forms of social organization that would have been impossible when survival was more precarious. Some developed elaborate courtship displays featuring their colorful feathers in dances that could last for hours. Others learned to cooperate in raising young, with multiple adults helping to feed and protect chicks in communal nesting arrangements. These behavioral innovations, passed down through generations and refined over time, became as important as physical changes in shaping their evolutionary success. By the time Earth had fully recovered from its period of darkness and cooling, the descendants of those modest surviving theropods had begun to resemble the birds we would recognize today, though their story of transformation was still far from complete. The story of dinosaur survival isn't just a tale we tell ourselves, it's written in stone, preserved in fossils that speak to us across millions of years with clarity that sometimes takes our breath away. These ancient remains have become like pages in Earth's greatest library, revealing details about the transition from dinosaurs to birds that scientists could never have imagined just decades ago. Some of the most remarkable evidence comes from fossil sites in China, where ancient lake beds preserved creatures with stunning completeness. Here, paleontologists have uncovered small theropod dinosaurs with their feathers intact, some still showing the colors they wore over 100 million years ago. Advanced techniques allow scientists to examine fossilized melanosomes, the tiny structures that create color in feathers, revealing that some of these ancient creatures bore brilliant reds like cardinals, deep blacks like ravens, and even iridescent blues and greens that would rival any modern hummingbird. Archaeopteryx, discovered in German limestone quarries, remains one of the most famous transitional fossils ever found. This creature, about the size of a crow, possessed both the teeth and claws of a dinosaur and the flight feathers of a bird. Its wings show the asymmetrical structure that creates lift during flight, while its skeleton reveals the hollow bones that make aerial life possible. Each specimen of Archaeopteryx tells us more about how flight evolved, showing us a creature perfectly balanced between two worlds. More recent discoveries have filled in even more pieces of this evolutionary puzzle. Microraptor, a four-winged dinosaur covered in black, iridescent feathers, shows us that early experiments with flight took forms we never expected. This small predator had wings on both its arms and legs, allowing it to glide between trees in ancient forests with remarkable grace and precision. Fossils of Confuciusornis reveal creatures that had already lost their teeth and developed the beaked faces we associate with modern birds, yet still retained claws on their wings. These discoveries help us understand that the transition to modern bird anatomy didn't happen all at once, but occurred through thousands of small changes over millions of years, with different traits appearing at different times in different lineages. Perhaps most touching are the fossils that preserve behavior as well as anatomy. Specimens of small theropods have been found sitting on their nests in exactly the same position that modern birds use to incubate their eggs. These discoveries show us that the parenting behaviors we see in birds today have roots that stretch back to their dinosaur ancestors, connecting modern chickadees and robins to creatures that lived when the world was vastly different. Recent advances in fossil preparation have revealed even more intimate details. Scientists can now see the patterns of blood vessels in fossil bones, the microscopic structure of feathers, and even evidence of what these ancient creatures ate in their final meals. Some fossils preserve soft tissues so well that researchers can study the shapes of internal organs, revealing that many small theropods had the complex air sac systems that help modern birds breathe efficiently during flight. Each new discovery adds another piece to our understanding of how dinosaurs became birds, showing us that this transformation was neither sudden nor simple, but rather a gradual flowering of possibilities that unfolded over millions of years of patient evolution. Step outside your door on any morning, and you'll find yourself surrounded by living evidence of one of evolution's most remarkable survival stories. The birds in your garden, the pigeons on city streets, the hawks circling overhead, every single one carries within its body the blueprints and behaviors of ancient dinosaurs, refined and perfected over millions of years, but still fundamentally unchanged in the most important ways. Their skeletons tell the story most clearly. When scientists examine a bird's bones under careful light, they see structures that would be instantly familiar to a paleontologist studying theropod dinosaurs. The hollow bones that make flight possible. They first appeared in small dinosaurs millions of years before birds learned to fly. The fusion of certain vertebrae that creates a rigid backbone for aerial maneuvers. This innovation helped ground-dwelling dinosaurs long before their descendants took to the skies. Even more remarkable are the behavioral echoes that connect modern birds to their ancient heritage. Watch a chicken scratch at the ground with alternating feet, and you're seeing the same movement patterns that small theropods used to uncover hidden food in prehistoric forests. Observe a bird turning its head to examine something with one eye, and you're witnessing a hunting behavior perfected by dinosaur ancestors who needed to spot both predators and prey with lightning-quick precision. The way birds build their nests reveals perhaps the most touching connection to the deep past. Fossilized nests of small theropods show the same careful arrangement of materials, the same protective positioning over eggs, even the same tendency to choose elevated, defensible locations that we see in modern birds. When a robin builds its nest in the fork of a tree branch, it's following architectural principles that kept dinosaur eggs safe over 100 million years ago. Recent genetic research has revealed even deeper connections that scientists are still working to fully understand. The genes that control feather development in modern birds are essentially identical to those that created the first primitive feathers in small dinosaurs. The biological pathways that generate the brilliant colors of cardinal red, jay blue, and finch yellow are the same cellular processes that painted similar colors on creatures that lived when flowers were just beginning to evolve. Bird songs, too, carry echoes of prehistoric communication. The complex vocalizations that fill our mornings with music operate through anatomical structures, specialized voice boxes and air sacs, that first evolved in dinosaurs as survival tools. What began as simple calls to warn of danger or locate food sources gradually developed into the intricate melodies that now mark territories, attract mates, and coordinate family groups across distances. The respiratory systems that allow birds to sing while flying at high altitudes are marvels of biological engineering that originated in dinosaurs facing very different challenges. These complex networks of air sacs and hollow bones were first adaptations for efficient breathing in active, warm-blooded creatures. When flight evolved later, these systems proved perfectly suited for the enormous oxygen demands of powered flight, though that wasn't their original purpose. Even the way birds move on the ground carries forward dinosaur heritage. The confident strut of a pigeon, head bobbing as it walks, mirrors the gait of bipedal theropods navigating ancient landscapes. The quick, darting movements of sparrows searching for seeds echo the hunting patterns of small dinosaurs pursuing insects through prehistoric undergrowth. Modern birds also retain the problem-solving intelligence that helped their ancestors survive catastrophic change. Ravens use tools, crows remember human faces for years, and parrots learn complex communication systems. This cognitive flexibility allowed small dinosaurs to adapt quickly to new circumstances after the world changed, and it continues to help their descendants thrive in environments from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests. Perhaps most remarkably, birds continue to evolve today using the same principles that carried dinosaurs through extinction. Urban birds develop new songs to communicate over traffic noise, migratory species adjust their routes as climates change, and island populations adapt to local conditions within just a few generations. The adaptability that saved dinosaurs from extinction continues to serve their descendants as they face the challenges of a modern world. Every time you hear a bird call or see wings catching sunlight, you're witnessing the continuation of a story that began in Earth's darkest hour, when small dinosaurs discovered that survival often belongs to the flexible rather than the mighty. Among the thousands of bird species that grace our modern world, some carry their dinosaur heritage more visibly than others, as if they've chosen to remember, rather than forget their ancient origins. These remarkable creatures offer us glimpses into what small theropod dinosaurs might have looked and behaved like in those crucial years following the Great Change. The cassowary of Australia and New Guinea stands as perhaps the most striking example of a living dinosaur. Standing nearly 6 feet tall, this magnificent bird possesses a bony crest called a casque that rises from its skull like a natural helmet, reminiscent of the head ornaments that adorned many prehistoric theropods. Its powerful legs end in dagger-like claws that can grow over 4 inches long, weapons that would have been perfectly at home on the feet of a velociraptor hunting through ancient forests. When a cassowary moves through dense rainforest, it does so with the confidence of a creature that has never forgotten how to be a predator. Its deep, booming calls can be heard over a mile away, carrying through thick vegetation with the same authority that dinosaur vocalizations once commanded in prehistoric landscapes. These sounds resonate at frequencies so low that humans feel them as much as hear them, a reminder of the power that once belonged to Earth's dominant land animals. Secretary birds of Africa demonstrate another fascinating connection to dinosaur hunting strategies. These elegant predators stride across savannas on legs that stretch over 3 feet long, their movements deliberate and focused as they search for snakes, lizards, and small mammals. When they spot prey, they attack with lightning-fast strikes, using their feet as weapons, in exactly the same way theropod dinosaurs once did millions of years ago. What makes secretary birds particularly remarkable is their fearlessness when confronting dangerous prey. They will attack venomous snakes with tactical precision, using their wings as shields while delivering devastating kicks that would make any ancient theropod proud. This behavior represents an unbroken chain of predatory techniques stretching back to the dawn of dinosaur evolution. Shoebill storks present another compelling window into the dinosaur past. These massive birds, standing over 4 feet tall, possess prehistoric-looking bills that seem designed for catching creatures much larger than the fish they typically hunt. Their patient hunting style, standing motionless for hours before exploding into sudden, violent action, mirrors the ambush techniques that likely served small theropods well in the uncertain world following the Great Extinction. Perhaps most eerily dinosaur-like is the way shoebills communicate with their young. Instead of melodic songs, they produce machine gun-like rattling sounds by rapidly clicking their massive bills together. These percussive conversations echo across African wetlands like something from a much more ancient world, reminding listeners that not all dinosaur descendants chose the path of musical expression. Even among smaller birds, some species preserve notably dinosaur-like characteristics. Hoatzins, found in South American rainforests, have young that possess functional claws on their wings, a trait that disappeared from most bird lineages millions of years ago, but persists in these living relics. When threatened, Hoatzin chicks can climb through trees using these wing claws in ways that would have been familiar to early feathered dinosaurs, learning to navigate 3-dimensional forest environments. Hornbills across Africa and Asia display another dinosaur heritage in their nesting behaviors. These birds seal themselves into tree cavities using mud and debris, leaving only a small opening through which the male feeds the incubating female and their chicks. This extreme commitment to protecting offspring mirrors the dedication that fossil evidence suggests was common among small theropod dinosaurs during their most vulnerable periods. These remarkable birds remind us that the line between dinosaurs and their modern descendants isn't as clear as we might imagine. In their behaviors, their anatomy, and their approach to survival, they carry forward the essence of creatures that mastered the art of persistence when the world seemed to be ending around them. Watch a bird building its nest, and you're witnessing behaviors that stretch back through millions of years to those first successful dinosaur survivors. These ancient instincts, refined and perfected through countless generations, reveal themselves in ways that connect our backyard birds directly to creatures that lived when the world was fundamentally different from today. The careful selection of nesting materials demonstrates knowledge that seems almost magical in its precision. A robin choosing exactly the right combination of mud, grass, and small twigs is following architectural principles that kept dinosaur eggs safe during Earth's most challenging periods. The way birds test each piece of material, bending twigs to check their flexibility, rolling mud to assess its binding properties, mirrors the same careful evaluation techniques that allowed their ancestors to create secure homes in a world full of uncertainties. Territorial displays offer another window into prehistoric behavior patterns. when a male cardinal spreads his brilliant red feathers and sings from the highest branch he can find. He's performing a ritual that would have been instantly recognizable to small theropod dinosaurs, establishing their own territories millions of years ago. The combination of visual display and vocal announcement served the same purposes then as now, declaring ownership, attracting mates, and warning competitors to keep their distance. These displays often involve intricate dances that seem too complex to be purely instinctual, yet birds perform them perfectly without any teaching. A peacock's elaborate courtship routine, with its precisely timed movements and carefully coordinated use of colorful plumage, represents the culmination of display behaviors that began when feathered dinosaurs first used their plumes to communicate with potential partners in prehistoric forests. The communal roosting behavior seen in many bird species also echoes ancient survival strategies. When hundreds of starlings gather in a single tree for the night, or when geese form protective circles around their young, they're employing safety techniques that served small dinosaurs well during the dangerous years when large predators still roamed the recovering landscape. The mathematics of group living, many eyes watching for danger, shared body warmth, cooperative defense, haven't changed since those early days. Perhaps most remarkably, migration patterns reveal navigation abilities that seem to transcend normal animal instincts. Birds can find their way across thousands of miles using combinations of magnetic fields, star patterns, and landscape features that suggest inherited knowledge accumulated over millions of years. This ability to navigate vast distances likely evolved from the disaster response behaviors that allowed surviving dinosaurs to escape deteriorating local conditions by traveling to more hospitable areas. The timing of these migrations demonstrates another layer of inherited wisdom. Birds begin their journeys based on day length, temperature changes, and other environmental cues that their ancestors learned to read during the climate chaos that followed the Great Extinction. These internal calendars, passed down through genetic memory, help modern birds anticipate seasonal changes with accuracy that often surpasses human weather prediction. Parental care behaviors reveal perhaps the most touching connections to the ancient past. The way birds incubate their eggs, turning them regularly to ensure even development, protecting them from temperature extremes, and defending nest sites with fierce determination, all follow patterns established by dinosaur parents over 100 million years ago. When a tiny wren drives off a much larger predator to protect its young, it's displaying courage that traces directly back to small theropods who faced similar challenges in a much more dangerous world. These inherited behaviors remind us that birds aren't just dinosaur descendants, they're living libraries of survival knowledge, carrying forward the accumulated wisdom of countless generations that faced and overcame challenges we can barely imagine. The adaptations that carried small dinosaurs through Earth's darkest period didn't simply disappear when the world recovered. They became permanent gifts that modern birds continue to use every day. These survival skills, honed by necessity during the years of scarcity and uncertainty, now serve their descendants in ways both subtle and remarkable. Dietary flexibility remains one of the most valuable inheritances from those ancient survivors. Watch crows in any city park, and you'll see this prehistoric adaptability in action. They eat insects in the morning, berries at midday, and scavenge human food in the afternoon, switching between protein sources, carbohydrates, and fats, with the same opportunistic intelligence that kept their ancestors alive when traditional food webs had collapsed. This willingness to try anything edible, refined over millions of years, allows modern birds to colonize environments from Arctic tundra to urban centers. The escape behaviors that proved so crucial during the extinction period continue to serve birds facing modern predators. When a sparrow suddenly takes flight at the slightest unusual movement, it's using reflexes that evolved when the difference between quick reaction and death could be measured in milliseconds. The zigzag flight patterns that make small birds difficult targets for hawks mirror the evasive maneuvers that helped their ancestors avoid the few remaining large predators in the post-extinction world. Problem-solving abilities that allowed dinosaur survivors to find food in unexpected places now help birds adapt to rapidly changing human environments. Ravens learn to drop nuts in front of cars to crack them open, using traffic as a tool in ways their ancestors might have used rocks or other environmental features. Urban birds time their activities to human schedules, learning that garbage becomes available at certain times, that outdoor cafes offer opportunities during lunch hours, and that construction sites often expose insects and worms. The social intelligence that emerged during those challenging years manifests itself in the complex communication systems we observe in modern bird flocks. When geese coordinate their V-formation flights, they're using cooperative strategies that trace back to small dinosaurs, who discovered that sharing information about food sources and dangers increased everyone's chances of survival. The honking calls that keep flocks together during long migrations echo the contact calls that helped scattered groups reunite in the aftermath of local disasters. Caching behavior, the practice of storing food for later use, represents another direct inheritance from extinction survivors. Clark's nutcracker can remember the locations of thousands of buried pine nuts across square miles of mountainous terrain, using spatial memory abilities that evolved when food was scarce and unpredictable. This capacity to plan for future scarcity helped ancestors survive seasons when immediate foraging wasn't sufficient. The ability to enter torpor or reduce metabolic activity during harsh conditions also persists in modern birds. Hummingbirds can lower their body temperature and heart rate dramatically during cold nights, using energy conservation techniques that mirror the survival strategies employed by small dinosaurs during the prolonged climate disruption following the asteroid impact. This biological flexibility allows birds to survive temporary food shortages or weather extremes that would challenge creatures with less adaptable metabolisms. Perhaps most remarkably, modern birds retain the exploratory behaviors that led their ancestors to discover new ecological niches in the empty post-extinction world. Young birds often wander far from their birth territories, investigating new areas and testing different lifestyles before settling down to breed. This dispersal behavior, driven by inherited restlessness, continues to help bird populations expand their ranges and adapt to environmental changes. The stress response systems that kept dinosaur survivors alert and ready to flee or fight now help modern birds navigate everything from predator encounters to severe weather. The rapid heartbeat and heightened awareness that floods a bird's system when danger approaches uses the same physiological pathways that carried their ancestors through years when threats could appear without warning. These survival skills remind us that evolution never wastes a good solution. The adaptations that saved dinosaurs from extinction continue to serve their descendants millions of years later, proving that the innovations born from necessity often become permanent advantages. Beneath the feathers and flight adaptations of every bird lies a skeleton that tells one of evolution's most compelling stories. These hidden frameworks reveal anatomical blueprints that connect sparrows and eagles directly to creatures that walked ancient Earth on powerful legs, long before anyone had learned to fly. The hollow bones that make flight possible didn't originate as an adaptation for aerial life. They first appeared in small theropod dinosaurs as a solution to the challenge of being both active and lightweight on the ground. These pneumatic bones, filled with air spaces connected to the respiratory system, allowed ancient dinosaurs to maintain strength while reducing the weight that their muscles needed to move. When flight eventually evolved, this pre-existing skeletal architecture proved perfectly suited for creatures that needed maximum strength with minimum mass. Bird skulls carry perhaps the most obvious connections to their prehistoric heritage. The large eye sockets that give birds their keen vision mirror the prominent eyes of small theropod dinosaurs, who needed excellent sight to spot both predators and prey in their challenging world. The lightweight construction of bird skulls, with their fusion of multiple bones into single, strong units, follows the same engineering principles that allowed dinosaur ancestors to support powerful jaw muscles while keeping their heads light enough for quick, agile movement. The respiratory system hidden within every bird represents one of evolution's most sophisticated solutions to the problem of high-energy living. This network of air sacs and tubes, extending throughout the body and into the hollow bones, creates a continuous flow of fresh air through the lungs that's far more efficient than the in and out breathing of mammals. This system first evolved in active dinosaurs who needed maximum oxygen delivery for their warm-blooded metabolism, long before their descendants required the enormous oxygen demands of powered flight. Perhaps most remarkably, the digestive systems of modern birds preserve anatomical solutions to feeding challenges that small dinosaur survivors faced in their transformed world. The muscular gizzards that help birds process tough seeds and plant material echo the same grinding chambers that allowed ancient theropods to extract maximum nutrition from whatever food sources they could find. The positioning of these organs, the way they work in coordination with specialized crops for food storage, all follow patterns established by creatures who learn to make the most of scarce and varied food supplies. The arrangement of flight muscles in birds reveals another layer of dinosaur heritage. The large breast muscles that power flight attach to bone structures that first appeared in ground-dwelling dinosaurs as anchor points for powerful arm muscles. These theropods used their muscular arms for grasping prey, manipulating objects, and possibly for display purposes, never imagining that these same attachment points would eventually support the muscles that would carry their descendants through the skies. Even the scales that still cover bird legs and feet represent unmodified dinosaur skin, unchanged from their prehistoric ancestors. These scales follow the same patterns, use the same cellular structures, and serve the same protective functions they did millions of years ago. When you see a chicken's feet, or observe the scaled legs of any bird, you're looking at authentic dinosaur anatomy that has persisted through countless generations. The cardiovascular systems of birds also retain their dinosaur origins. The four-chambered hearts that pump blood efficiently through active, warm-blooded bodies first evolved in dinosaurs, who needed to maintain constant internal temperatures and high activity levels. The positioning of major blood vessels, the structure of heart chambers, even the electrical systems that coordinate heartbeats, all follow blueprints established long before flight existed. These hidden anatomical connections remind us that birds aren't simply dinosaur-like creatures. They are dinosaurs, carrying forward the physical legacy of survival in their very bones and organs. Walk through any city on a quiet morning, and you'll discover that you're not alone among the concrete and steel. Millions of dinosaurs share our urban spaces, displaying survival behaviors that connect directly to those crucial years when their ancestors learned to thrive in a world where everything familiar had disappeared. These city-dwelling descendants have found ways to turn human environments into extensions of the adaptive strategies that saved their lineage millions of years ago. Pigeons, perhaps our most visible urban dinosaurs, demonstrate remarkable parallels to their prehistoric heritage in how they navigate city landscapes. They roost on building ledges that mirror the cliff faces their ancestors chose for safety, selecting elevated positions that offer clear views of potential threats and easy escape routes. Their ability to find food scraps scattered across sidewalks and plazas echoes the opportunistic foraging that allowed small theropods to survive when normal food sources had vanished from the world. The social flocking behavior of urban birds reveals ancient survival wisdom adapted to modern circumstances. When starlings gather in massive murmurations above city centers, wheeling and turning as a single entity, they're using predator avoidance techniques that stretch back to times when safety truly did depend on numbers. These coordinated movements, beautiful as aerial ballets, represent millions of years of refinement in collective survival strategies. House sparrows display another fascinating connection to extinction-era adaptations in their approach to nesting. They build homes in the most unexpected places, traffic lights, building crevices, even inside neon signs, showing the same opportunistic use of available shelter that helped their ancestors survive when traditional nesting sites were scarce or dangerous. Their ability to construct functional nests from entirely artificial materials demonstrates the material flexibility that kept dinosaur lineages alive during environmental chaos. Urban hawks, perched on skyscrapers and hunting pigeons through narrow city canyons, reveal how predatory behaviors translate across vastly different environments. Their patience while scanning the streets below mirrors the watchful vigilance that small theropod predators once needed to survive in the disrupted ecosystems following the Great Dying. The way they use building architecture to create ambush points shows the same tactical thinking that served prehistoric hunters navigating through fallen forests and rocky outcrops. Perhaps most remarkably, city birds demonstrate the same rapid behavioral adaptation that characterized their ancestors' response to environmental change. Urban songbirds have learned to adjust their calls to frequencies that carry over traffic noise, essentially changing their language to communicate in human-dominated soundscapes. This flexibility in vocal communication echoes the adaptability that allowed surviving dinosaurs to develop new ways of staying in contact with their groups when familiar habitats had been transformed. The timing of urban bird activities reveals another layer of inherited wisdom. Many city birds have learned to coordinate their daily routines with human schedules, recognizing patterns in our behavior that create predictable opportunities for food and safety. They know when outdoor cafes will provide crumbs, when parks will be empty enough for ground foraging, and when rush hour traffic offers the safest times to drink from street puddles. This ability to read environmental rhythms and adjust behavior accordingly represents the same kind of adaptive intelligence that helped their ancestors survive unpredictable conditions. Crows in cities showcase perhaps the most sophisticated examples of problem-solving abilities inherited from dinosaur ancestors. They learn to use traffic to crack nuts, recognize individual human faces over years, and even appear to hold grudges against people who have threatened them. They work together to mob predators, cache food in hidden locations throughout their territories, and pass information about dangers and opportunities through their communities. These behaviors represent the culmination of cognitive abilities that first evolved to help small dinosaurs navigate the complex challenges of survival in an uncertain world. Even the way urban birds claim and defend territories echoes prehistoric patterns. Cardinals singing from the same high perch each morning, robins aggressively chasing competitors from their chosen patches of lawn, and wrens defending nest boxes with fierce determination, all demonstrate territorial behaviors that helped their ancestors secure the resources they needed to survive and reproduce in a world where competition for limited resources could mean the difference between life and death. Section 18. Voices from the Deep Past. Every dawn chorus that greets the morning light carries echoes of voices that first called across a world transformed by catastrophe. The songs filling our gardens and parks aren't just pleasant melodies. They're acoustic archaeology, preserving communication systems that helped small dinosaurs survive and thrive when traditional ways of living had been swept away by change. The anatomical structures that create birdsongs tell remarkable stories of prehistoric innovation. Deep within each singing bird lies a syrinx, a specialized voice box that allows for the complex melodies we associate with morning birdsong. This intricate organ, positioned where the bird's airway splits toward each lung, can produce multiple sounds simultaneously, creating harmonies and overtones that would be impossible with simpler vocal equipment. Scientists believe this sophisticated sound-producing system evolved from the communication needs of small theropod dinosaurs, who required precise vocal signals to coordinate survival activities in their changed world. Recent research suggests that the fundamental patterns of bird communication, the rhythms, the frequency ranges, even the way calls convey specific information about danger or food sources, originated in the survival pressures faced by extinction-era dinosaurs. When a robin sings its liquid notes at dawn, it's using vocal techniques refined over millions of years of evolution that began with creatures calling through the dusty twilight of a recovering world. Different types of calls serve functions that directly parallel the communication needs of prehistoric survivors. Alarm calls that instantly alert entire bird communities to approaching predators follow patterns established when small dinosaurs needed to share information about the few remaining large threats in their environment. These sharp, urgent vocalizations cut through background noise with frequencies specifically evolved to capture immediate attention, a design requirement that served life or death situations in ancient times. Territory songs reveal another layer of prehistoric function. When a cardinal establishes its boundaries through repeated melodic phrases, or when a wren defends its chosen nesting area with complex trills, they're using vocal techniques that helped dinosaur ancestors claim and maintain access to crucial resources. The carrying power of these songs, their distinctive individual characteristics, and their ability to convey information about the singer's health and determination all serve purposes that were essential when resources were scarce and competition was intense. Contact calls that help bird flocks stay together during flight or foraging also preserve ancient communication strategies. The gentle chatter of chickadees moving through forest canopy, or the honking calls that coordinate goose migrations across thousands of miles, represent refinements of vocal systems that once helped scattered dinosaur groups reunite after local disasters or environmental disruptions. Perhaps most fascinating are the learning abilities that allow young birds to acquire their species songs from adult teachers. This cultural transmission of vocal patterns means that bird songs can evolve and adapt over time, just as they likely did during the rapid environmental changes that followed the Great Extinction. Young birds learn not just the basic patterns of their species' calls, but also local dialects, individual variations, and even entirely new vocal innovations that spread through populations like prehistoric versions of social media. The dawn chorus itself, that coordinated symphony of different species singing together in the early morning hours, may represent a community behavior that traces back to small dinosaurs gathering at safe times and places to share information about food sources, dangers, and opportunities in their recovering world. In every birdsong, we hear voices that have been calling across millions of years, carrying forward the acoustic heritage of creatures who learned to sing their way through Earth's greatest challenge. The cognitive abilities that we admire in modern birds, their problem-solving skills, their capacity for learning, their remarkable memories, didn't emerge from nothing. These mental capabilities trace their origins to the intelligence that carried small theropod dinosaurs through the most challenging period in Earth's history, when survival required not just physical adaptation, but the ability to think, learn, and innovate in real time. Brain fossils from small theropods reveal surprisingly large cerebral regions relative to their body size, particularly in areas associated with processing sensory information and coordinating complex behaviors. These enlarged brain structures suggest that dinosaur survivors possessed the cognitive flexibility necessary to evaluate new situations, remember successful strategies, and modify their behavior when circumstances changed. This mental agility proved crucial when traditional approaches to finding food, avoiding danger, and raising young no longer worked in their transformed world. Modern corvids, crows, ravens, and jays demonstrate perhaps the most striking examples of inherited dinosaur intelligence. These birds can use tools, solve multi-step puzzles, recognize themselves in mirrors, and even appear to plan for future events. When a crow learns to bend a wire into a hook to extract food from a narrow tube, it's displaying the same kind of innovative thinking that allowed its ancestors to exploit new food sources when familiar resources disappeared. The ability to learn from experience and pass that knowledge to offspring represents another crucial inheritance from prehistoric ancestors. Birds that successfully navigate migration routes, find reliable food sources, or identify safe nesting sites can teach these discoveries to their young through direct demonstration and social learning. This cultural transmission of survival knowledge mirrors the way small dinosaur communities likely shared information about successful adaptations to their changing environment. Memory capabilities in birds often exceed what seems necessary for their current lifestyles, suggesting these abilities evolved to meet more demanding circumstances than those faced by most modern species. Clark's nutcracker can remember the precise locations of thousands of buried seeds across vast territories, while Arctic terns can navigate across entire hemispheres using landmarks, magnetic fields, and stellar patterns remembered from previous journeys. These extraordinary memory feats likely evolved from the navigation and food caching requirements that helped dinosaur survivors locate scarce resources across large territories. Problem-solving abilities manifest themselves in countless ways across different bird species. Herons learn to use breadcrumbs as bait to attract fish, demonstrating an understanding of cause and effect that extends beyond instinctive behaviors. Parrots can learn to associate words with meanings, showing cognitive flexibility that suggests their brains can form abstract connections between symbols and concepts. These abilities represent refinements of the mental processes that allowed dinosaur ancestors to recognize patterns, make predictions, and adapt their strategies based on changing circumstances. Social intelligence among birds reveals another dimension of inherited cognitive abilities. Many species can recognize individual members of their flocks, remember social relationships, and coordinate group activities that require sophisticated communication and cooperation. When geese take turns leading their V-formation flights, or when birds work together to mob predators that threaten their communities, they're using social intelligence that traces back to the cooperative behaviors that helped small dinosaur groups survive through collective action. The rapid learning abilities displayed by many bird species also connect directly to their prehistoric heritage. Birds can modify their behaviors within single generations in response to new challenges, whether learning to avoid novel predators, exploit new food sources, or adapt to changing environmental conditions. This behavioral flexibility represents the same kind of rapid adaptation that allowed dinosaur survivors to keep pace with the swift environmental changes that characterized the post-extinction world. These cognitive abilities remind us that intelligence itself was one of the key adaptations that carried dinosaurs through extinction, giving rise to some of the most intellectually capable animals on our planet today. The story of how dinosaurs became birds offers profound insights that extend far beyond paleontology, teaching us fundamental lessons about resilience, adaptation, and the nature of survival itself. These lessons, written in feathers and bone, speak to challenges that life continues to face in our rapidly changing modern world. Perhaps the most important lesson is that survival often belongs not to the largest or most specialized, but to those most capable of change. The small theropods that inherited the Earth weren't necessarily superior to their giant relatives. They were simply more flexible when flexibility mattered most. Their success reminds us that adaptability trumps dominance when environments shift dramatically, a principle that applies to ecosystems, economies, and human societies alike. The dinosaur survival story also reveals the power of what scientists call pre-adaptation, having traits that prove useful in unexpected ways. The hollow bones that later enabled flight originally evolved for different purposes entirely. The feathers that became wings first served as insulation. This teaches us that solutions to future problems often exist in present circumstances, waiting to be discovered or repurposed when new challenges arise. Modern conservation efforts have learned valuable lessons from studying how dinosaurs navigated environmental catastrophe. Small populations with genetic diversity and behavioral flexibility show greater resilience than large populations adapted to specific conditions. This understanding helps guide efforts to protect endangered species, suggesting that preserving adaptability may be more important than preserving population size alone. The rapid evolution that followed the dinosaur extinction demonstrates life's remarkable capacity for innovation when freed from the constraints of established competition. This principle applies beyond biology. Industries, cultures, and ideas often experience similar bursts of creativity after disruptive events, clear away dominant players, and create space for new approaches to emerge. Birds today continue to teach us about adaptation in action. Urban birds that modify their songs to communicate over traffic noise, migratory species that adjust their routes as climates change, and island populations that develop new characteristics within just a few generations all demonstrate evolution's ongoing responsiveness to environmental pressures. The complexity of modern bird behaviors, their tool use, social cooperation, and problem-solving abilities reminds us that intelligence and adaptability often prove more valuable than physical strength or size. This lesson resonates in our technology-driven world, where success increasingly belongs to those who can learn, adapt, and innovate, rather than those who simply dominate through force. Perhaps most importantly, the dinosaur-to-bird transition shows us that survival isn't just about enduring catastrophe, it's about emerging from crisis with new capabilities and possibilities. The descendants of extinction survivors didn't just persist, they discovered entirely new ways of living that transformed their world. They learned to fly, to sing, to navigate vast distances, and to exploit ecological niches that their ancestors never could have imagined. The morning songs outside our windows remind us daily that life finds ways not just to survive, but to flourish beyond our wildest expectations. In every bird that greets the dawn, we see evidence that even the most catastrophic endings can become unexpected beginnings, carrying forward the best of the past, while opening doorways to futures filled with possibilities we're only beginning to understand. As our journey through this remarkable story draws to a gentle close, we find ourselves back where we began, listening to the sounds drifting through our windows, but hearing them now with new understanding. Those soft chirps and melodic trills carry with them the echoes of an epic tale that spans millions of years, connecting us to moments of triumph that shaped the very nature of life on Earth. The mystery of how dinosaurs survived extinction continues to unfold with each new discovery, each careful observation of the living descendants that share our world. Every nest built with ancient wisdom, every migration undertaken with inherited navigation skills, every song sung in frequencies perfected across geological ages, adds another piece to this endless puzzle of adaptation and resilience. Scientists, working in laboratories and field sites around the world, continue to reveal new chapters in this story. Advanced techniques allow us to see colors preserved in fossil feathers, to understand the biochemistry of prehistoric eggs, and to trace genetic connections that link modern birds to creatures that lived when the world was fundamentally different. Each revelation deepens our appreciation for the ingenuity of life itself. Yet perhaps the most profound discoveries await not in ancient rocks or sophisticated laboratories, but in the quiet moments of observation available to anyone willing to pause and truly watch the birds around them. The cardinal that visits your garden each morning carries within its being a story of survival that surpasses any human adventure tale. The humble sparrow searching for seeds embodies resilience that has been tested and proven across millions of years. In learning to see birds as living dinosaurs, we discover that we share our world with creatures whose ancestors witnessed the greatest transformation in Earth's history and found ways not just to endure, but to flourish beyond imagination. They remind us that even in our planet's darkest hours, life finds pathways forward, carrying the best of the past into futures filled with unexpected possibilities. The next time you hear birdsong drifting through your window, remember that you're listening to voices that have been calling across time itself, carrying forward messages of hope and adaptation from a world that seemed to be ending, but instead became the beginning of something beautiful. In their songs, in their flight, in their endless capacity for wonder and adaptation, dinosaurs continue their journey among us, reminding us daily that survival is not just about enduring. It's about transforming challenge into opportunity and catastrophe into new forms of grace. If you've enjoyed this video, then like it and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on new uploads. Sweet dreams, my friends.